Please, just this once, show some kindness. Lend me the money for Leo's medicine and promise not to sell our land.
I have realized that a marriage should be about more than politics and alliances. Perhaps it should be about character and respect.
You came into my life like a ray of light in the darkness. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife, my princess?
African Karma Stories. Aria's heart was heavy. It felt like a stone in her chest, pulling her down with every step she took on the dusty path. The harm wind was cool, but it carried no comfort. It only seemed to whisper worries into her ear. Back in their small, crumbling house on the edge of the hamlet, her younger brother, Leo, was sick. His stomach hurt so much that he could barely stand, and his face was pale and tight with pain. Her mother, Mother Ilara, sat on the edge of the thin mattress they all shared, her blind eyes staring at nothing. Tears tracked clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. "He needs medicine, Aria," she had whispered, her voice trembling. "We cannot let him suffer like this." Aria knew. Of course she knew. The knowledge was another stone, adding to the weight inside her. But knowing was not the same as having. They had no money. Not a single coin was left in the small clay pot where they kept their savings. The last of it had gone to buy a small bag of grain 2 days ago, and that was almost finished. Aria had tried to sound cheerful. "Don't worry, Mother Ilara. I will find a way. God will provide." But the words felt hollow even to her own ears. She had already asked for credit at the village patent medicine store, but the owner had shaken his head. "No more hope," he had said, not unkindly. "You still owe me for the last time." Now she was walking toward the only other place she could think of, her uncle's house. Mr. Malachi was her father's younger brother, but he was not a kind man. He was hard and greedy, and he had always looked down on them since father died. He lived in a bigger house made of concrete blocks, not mud like theirs, and he owned a small shop in the village market. He had money, but he never shared it. As she walked, she remembered what her friend Mira had told her just yesterday by the stream. Mira had been washing her family's clothes, her arms deep in soapy water. Her voice had dropped to a whisper. "Aria, be careful. I heard some men talking in the market. They said your uncle is looking for a buyer for your father's land." Aria had stopped, the water pot on her head suddenly feeling 10 times heavier. "Our land! But he cannot do that. Father left it for us." Mira had shrugged, her eyes full of pity. "You know how Mr. Malachi is. He says since your father is gone and your brother is just a boy, he is the head of the family. He says the land is his to manage, to sell." Mira had meant. The thought made a cold fear spread through Aria's stomach. That small piece of land was all they had left of their father. It was where they grew the crops that kept them from starving completely. If Mr. Malachi sold it, they would not only be poor and sick, they would be homeless with nowhere to go. The fear made her walk faster. She had to talk to him. She had to beg him. Maybe just this once he would show some kindness. Maybe he would lend her the money for Leo's medicine and promise not to sell their land. It was a small hope, a tiny flicker of light in a great darkness, but it was all she had. The path curved, and she could see his house ahead. It had a metal roof that shone in the morning sun, unlike the rusty, patched-up roof of her own home. A new motorcycle was parked outside. He was getting richer while they were getting poorer. The unfairness of it all made her feel angry, but she pushed the feeling down. Anger would not help Leo, only money would. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She smoothed down her worn wrapper and wiped the dust from her face with the back of her hand. She had to look strong, not like a desperate beggar, even though that was exactly what she felt like. As she approached the gate, a fancy-looking car she had never seen before suddenly sputtered to a stop right in front of her. The driver, a man in a neat uniform, got out and opened the hood, a worried look on his face. Aria paused, her own troubles forgotten for a moment. It was not every day a car like that came to their small village. It was long and sleek, the color of rich cream, and it looked like it belonged in the big city of Oakhaven, not on their dusty, unpaved road. A man got out of the back seat. He was tall and wore clothes that looked impossibly expensive. His robe was made of a fabric that shimmered, and the beads around his neck were heavy and colorful. He was handsome, with a kind face that looked out of place with all that wealth. He looked around, a little lost, and then his eyes met Aria's. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The dust, the heat, the weight in her chest, it all faded away. There was only the quiet surprise in his eyes and the sudden strange flutter in her own heart. She had no idea that this man, this prince from another world, was about to change her life forever. All she knew was that she had come to beg for a little money, and instead she had found something she never even knew she was looking for. The weight on her heart did not disappear, but for the first time in a very long time, it felt a little bit lighter. The path ahead was still uncertain, but a new, unexpected track had just appeared. Prince Julian sighed and leaned his head back against the soft leather of the car seat. The air inside the vehicle was cool, a welcome relief from the thick, humid air of the metropolis. He had just spent 3 hours at a tiresome government function, smiling and shaking hands until his face ached. All he wanted now was the peace and quiet of the manor, a cool drink, and perhaps an hour alone with a good book. "Turn up the music, Julian, darling," a voice beside him said, far too loud. "This silence is so boring." Julian opened his eyes and looked at Selina. She was beautiful, he had to admit. Today she wore a bright red dress that was probably too revealing for a state event, and a wide-brimmed hat that kept bumping against the car ceiling. Her red hair, which was not its natural color, was a wild cascade of curls around her face. She had just returned from a 2-year study program in the West. And she made sure no one forgot it. "It's not boring, Selina," he said patiently. "It's peaceful." "Peaceful as another word for boring," she declared, pulling a small, shiny flask from her handbag. She unscrewed the cap and took a sip. The sharp smell of spirits filled the car. Julian frowned. "Is that really necessary? It's barely past noon." Selina laughed, a high tinkling sound that grated on his nerves. "Oh, darling, don't be such a local champion. This is how we do it in the West, a little drink to liven things up." He glanced at his driver, Caleb, in the front seat. Caleb's eyes met his for a second in the rearview mirror. The driver's face was like stone, but Julian could see the disapproval in the set of his shoulders. Caleb had served the royal family for 20 years. He was loyal, quiet, and deeply traditional. He saw Selina not as a future queen, but as a problem. Julian couldn't help but agree. His engagement to Selina was not his choice. It was a deal, a political alliance cooked up by his father, King Alaric, and Selina's father, the powerful Chancellor Vance. The marriage was meant to join two of the most influential families in the region, securing power and wealth for generations to come. It had nothing to do with love. When Selina had left for the West 2 years ago, Julian had been relieved. He had hoped the time and distance would change things. Maybe she would find someone else. Maybe he would. But she had returned last week, louder and more foreign than ever, and now the wedding plans were moving forward. He felt like a pawn in a game he had no interest in playing. "You've been so quiet since I got back, Jules," Selina pouted, calling him by the nickname he disliked. "Aren't you happy to see me?" She leaned closer, her perfume overwhelmingly sweet. "Of course I am," he lied, shifting away slightly. I'm just tired. It was a long morning. Well, let's make it an exciting afternoon, she giggled, taking another sip from her flask. She tried to offer it to him, but he shook his head. He looked out the window, watching the neat paved roads of the city give way to the bumpy reddish-brown dirt tracks of the countryside. They were getting closer to the manor, which was located in a large private estate just outside a cluster of small hamlets. He loved this part of the journey. The air always seemed cleaner here, filled with the scent of earth and growing things. He saw women walking along the road with baskets on their heads and farmers working in fields of tall green maize. This was the real country, his country. It felt a world away from the artificial life Selena represented. He missed the simplicity of it. He sometimes wished he hadn't been born a prince. He longed for a life where his choices were his own, where he could fall in love with someone for who they was, not for what their family could offer his. Suddenly, the smooth hum of the engine faltered. The car coughed once, then twice, and began to slow down. "What's happening?" Selena asked, annoyed. Caleb guided the car to the side of the road. "I'm not sure, my prince. It seems to be an engine problem." He turned the key, but the engine only made a sad clicking sound. Julian looked out the window. They were on a lonely stretch of road surrounded by farmland. In the distance, he could see the thatched roofs of a small hamlet. There were no other cars in sight. "Wonderful," Selena muttered, fanning herself with her hand. "Just wonderful, stranded in the middle of nowhere." Julian felt a strange mix of annoyance and something else, a flicker of unexpected freedom. For now, at least he was free from the manor, free from his duties, and stuck. He got out of the car, breathing in the dusty, sun-warmed air. It was then that he saw her. A young woman was walking towards them down the path, a clay pot balanced perfectly on her head. She moved with a natural grace that made him stop and stare. She was not beautiful in the way Selena was, with her bright makeup and fancy clothes. This girl's beauty was quiet and real, like the land around them. He didn't know it yet, but the engine of his car was not the only thing that had broken down. In that moment, on that dusty road, the carefully constructed engine of his life had also begun to sputter and fail, making way for something entirely new and unexpected. Aria walked with her head down, her mind a whirlwind of worries. What if Mr. Malachi had already sold the land? What if he refused to give her money for Leo? The questions chased each other around in her head, so loud that she barely noticed the fancy cars stopped on the side of the road. Suddenly, the car's engine gave a loud cough and lurched forward. Aria jumped back with a small cry, her heart leaping into her throat. The heavy clay pot on her head wobbled, and she reached up just in time to steady it. "I am so sorry," a voice called out. "Are you all right?" Aria looked up, her breath catching. The man who had gotten out of the car was walking toward her. It was the handsome, richly dressed man she had noticed just moments before. He looked genuinely concerned, his brow furrowed. "I'm fine," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. She felt shy and small in her faded wrapper, her feet dusty from the road. She was suddenly very aware of how poor she must look to him. "The car seems to have a mind of its own," he said with a small apologetic smile. "My name is Julian." He didn't say Prince Julian. He just said his name, as if he were any other person. That small act of humility made Aria feel a little more at ease. "I am Aria," she replied softly. The driver, Caleb, came over. "My prince, the engine is dead. I think we will need a mechanic." Julian looked around at the empty road. "Is there one nearby?" he asked Aria. She nodded. "Yes, in the next village. It is not far to walk. Mr. Rowan's workshop is just past the market square. Everyone knows him." Julian smiled, a warm, genuine smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Thank you, Aria. You've saved us." He then turned to his driver. "Caleb, could you please walk to the village and find Mr. Rowan? I will wait here with the car." Caleb nodded respectfully and set off down the road. An awkward silence fell between Aria and the prince. She didn't know what to say to someone like him. She shifted her weight, the pot on her head feeling heavy again. "You carry that so easily," Julian said, breaking the silence. "It must be heavy." "I am used to it," Aria said simply. "I fetch water from the stream every day." He looked at her with a curious expression. "You live in the village nearby?" "Yes, just at the edge of it." He seemed to want to ask more, but he didn't. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his robe and pulled out a thick roll of notes. He peeled off several large bills and held them out to her. "Please," he said, "for your trouble and for the fright I gave you." Aria stared at the money. It was more than she had seen in months. It was enough to buy medicine for Leo and food for a whole week, maybe even more. But her mother had always taught her not to accept gifts from strangers. "No, thank you," she said, shaking her head. "It is not necessary. I am glad I could help." "I insist," Julian said, his voice gentle but firm. "Please take it. It would make me feel better." She hesitated, her need warring with her pride. She thought of Leo's pained face and her mother's tears. She slowly reached out and took the money, her fingers brushing against his. A strange warmth shot up her arm. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes cast down. "Thank you very much." She wanted to run away then, to escape his kind eyes and the confusing feelings he was stirring in her. But she made herself stand still, her dignity her only shield. Just then, Caleb returned, followed by a man in greasy overalls who must be Mr. Rowan the mechanic. "The prince is very lucky," Mr. Rowan said, wiping his hands on a rag. "My own truck is just down the road. I can give you a tow back to my workshop." Julian nodded his thanks to the mechanic and then turned back to Aria. "Thank you again, Aria. I hope we meet again." His words were simple, but they held a promise that made her heart beat a little faster. She simply nodded, unable to speak. She watched as they hooked the cream-colored car to the mechanic's old truck. Julian got back into the passenger seat, and as the truck pulled away, he looked back at her one last time. Their eyes met across the dusty distance, and Aria felt that strange flutter in her heart again. She stood there for a long moment after the car was out of sight, clutching the money in her hand. It felt warm, as if it held some of the prince's own kindness. She had forgotten all about confronting her uncle. All she could think about was the man with the gentle smile and the sad eyes. Finally, she turned and started walking back the way she came, her steps much lighter than before. She would go to the medicine store first, then the market. Tonight, her family would eat well. As she hurried home, a small, hopeful thought entered her mind. Maybe, just maybe, God really had provided. In the car, Julian was also lost in thought. The image of the village girl with her quiet strength and shy smile was burned into his mind. "Caleb," he said suddenly, his voice firm, "find out who she is. I want to know everything about her." The small room was filled with the delicious smell of frying plantain and stew. For the first time in many weeks, there was more than enough food. Aria had bought a whole bag of rice, yams, and even a small piece of fish. The money from the kind stranger felt like a miracle. Leo was sitting up in bed, a small bowl of rice in his lap. The medicine Aria had bought seemed to be working. The tight lines of pain on his face had softened, and he was eating with a good appetite. "This is the best stew you have ever made, Aria," he said, his mouth full. Aria smiled, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. "It is the same stew I always make. Maybe you are just hungry." But Mother Alara, sitting in her usual corner, was not smiling. Her blind eyes were turned towards Aria, her face a mask of worry. "Aria, my daughter," she said, her voice low, "where did this money come from?" Aria's smile faded. She knew her mother would ask. Mother Alara had always been proud and had taught her children never to take what wasn't theirs. Mother Alara, I told you a man's car broke down on the road. I helped him and he was grateful. What kind of man gives so much money for just pointing the way to a mechanic? Mother Alara asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Did he ask for anything in return?
Aria felt a blush creep up her neck. No, Mother, he was not like that. He was a gentleman. He was kind. She described the man, his expensive clothes, and the fancy car. I think he is a very rich man from the city. The money was probably nothing to him. Mother Ilara was silent for a long time, her hands twisting in her lap. Finally, she sighed. The world is a dangerous place for a young woman, Aria. Rich men can be the most dangerous of all. He was not dangerous, Aria insisted, her voice soft but sure. She remembered the look in his eyes, the gentle way he had spoken to her. She could not believe a man like that would mean her any harm. Before her mother could say more, there was a knock at their door. It was a soft, hesitant knock, not the loud, demanding bang of their landlord or the angry pounding of Mr. Malachi. Aria's heart skipped a beat. She opened the door a crack and peered out. Standing there was the driver from the fancy car. He was holding a large basket filled with fruits and provisions. "Good afternoon," he said politely. "My name is Caleb. My master, Prince Julian, sent me. He was worried about you and your family." Prince Julian! So he was a prince after all. Aria's mind reeled. A prince had spoken to her, had given her money, and now had sent his driver with gifts. It felt like something out of a storybook. She let Caleb in, and he placed the heavy basket on their small table. Mother Ilara, hearing the strange voice, grew tense again. "Who is it, Aria?" "It is the driver of the man I told you about, Mother," Aria explained, her voice filled with awe. "His master is a prince." Caleb bowed his head respectfully to Mother Ilara. "The prince sends his greetings. He asked me to make sure your family has everything you need." The kindness of the gesture was overwhelming. Tears pricked at Aria's eyes. She thanked Caleb, who simply nodded and said he would be back to check on them again. After he left, the small room was filled with a sense of wonder. They looked at the basket filled with oranges, mangoes, tins of milk, and bags of sugar. It was a treasure trove. "A prince," Mother Ilara whispered, her hand reaching out to touch a smooth, ripe mango. "Why would a prince care about a poor family like ours?" Aria did not have an answer. She only knew that the prince's kindness felt like a ray of sunshine breaking through the dark clouds that had hung over their lives for so long. That night, for the first time in a very long time, Aria went to sleep with a heart full of something other than worry. She dreamt of a kind smile and gentle eyes, and of a future that might hold more than just struggle and sorrow. The weight of the world was still there, but now it seemed she might not have to carry it all by herself. A prince knew her name, and for some reason he had chosen to be kind. It was a small thing, perhaps, but to Aria it felt like everything. The dining hall of the royal manor was a study in quiet elegance. The long mahogany table gleamed under the light of a crystal chandelier. The plates were fine china, and the cutlery was heavy silver. Yet the atmosphere was as stiff and cold as the polished silverware. King Alaric sat at the head of the table, his face a stern mask. He had been trying for days to talk to his son about the wedding arrangements, but Julian had been evasive. Tonight, he had insisted on a formal family dinner with Chancellor Vance and Selena as their guest to force the issue. He wanted to see his son and future daughter-in-law together, acting like the power couple they were meant to be. But the evening was not going as planned.
Prince Julian was quiet and withdrawn, barely touching his food. Selina, on the other hand, was trying too hard. She talked loudly about her time in the West, dropping names of places and people no one at the table had ever heard of. "In New York," she announced, "we would never eat a heavy meal like this for dinner. It's all about light salads and maybe a glass of champagne." Queen Seraphina, a woman of quiet dignity, gave a tight, polite smile. "Here in this land we enjoy our food, my dear. It is a sign of hospitality." Of course," Selina said quickly, realizing her mistake. But a few minutes later, she made another. She pulled out a long, thin cigarette from her purse and lit it right there at the dining table. A shocked silence fell. King Alaric's eyes narrowed. Smoking was something done in private, not at the royal dinner table in front of elders. It was a sign of deep disrespect. Julian finally spoke, his voice low and sharp. "Selina, put that out." Selina looked surprised. "What? It's just a cigarette, Jules." "It is disrespectful," Julian said, his eyes flashing with anger. "We are not in a nightclub in Miami. We are in my father's house." Selina's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She stubbed out the cigarette in her side plate, a small defiant gesture. King Alaric decided it was time to take control. "Julian, we need to set a date for the wedding. Your father-in-law and I are in agreement that it should be soon. A grand wedding will strengthen the bonds between our families and the state." Julian set down his fork. "Father, I am not ready to discuss the wedding." "Not ready?" the king boomed. "You have been engaged for 2 years. What is there to be ready for?" "Perhaps," Julian said, his voice dangerously quiet, "I have realized that a marriage should be about more than politics and alliances." He glanced at Selina, who was glaring at him. "Perhaps it should be about character and respect." The jab was not subtle. Selina gasped. Chancellor Vance shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "What is this nonsense you are speaking?" King Alaric demanded. "Are you questioning my judgment?" "I am questioning the idea of marrying someone I do not love or respect," Julian said boldly. His eyes then took on a faraway look. "I met a woman in the hamlet the other day, a real woman, someone with grace and dignity, someone who understands our traditions." Selina's eyes widened with suspicion. "A village woman? What were you doing with a village woman?" "My car broke down," Julian said dismissively, but the damage was done. The seed of jealousy had been planted in Selina's mind, and the seed of rebellion had been planted in the king's. Later that evening, after their guests had left in a cloud of tension, King Alaric summoned Julian to his private study. "I will not have it," the king roared, pacing the thick Persian rug. "I will not have my son, the heir to this throne, chasing after some nameless, penniless girl from the hamlet. You will marry Selina, and you will do it soon. This alliance is too important to be ruined by your foolish sentiment." "It is not foolish to want a wife I can be proud of," Julian retorted. "You will be proud of the power this marriage brings," his father shouted. "End this foolishness now. I forbid you from seeing that girl again. Do you understand me?" Julian stared at his father, his jaw tight. He did not say yes, but he did not say no either. He simply turned and walked out of the study, leaving the king fuming. Meanwhile, in her own lavish home, Selina was also fuming. A village girl. The insult was unbearable. Who was this girl who had captured Julian's attention? She had to find out. She picked up her phone and made a call. "I need you to find someone for me," she said to the voice on the other end. "He's a private investigator, the best one. I want you to have him follow Prince Julian. I want to know everywhere he goes and everyone he sees, especially if he goes back to that hamlet." She hung up the phone, her eyes cold and hard. If some poor, insignificant girl thought she could steal her prince, she was about to learn a very painful lesson. Selena was not a woman who lost, and she would do whatever it took to win. A few days later, Prince Julian found a reason to escape the manor. He told his father he was going to inspect some of the community development projects the kingdom was funding in the surrounding hamlets. It was a plausible excuse, one that even the king could not object to, but his real destination was the small, dusty village where he had met Aria. He had Caleb drive him, but he instructed his official guards to remain at the manor. He trusted Caleb, who understood the prince's heart better than anyone. Caleb had already found out where Aria lived and a little about her family's struggles. He knew the prince was not just curious, he was genuinely concerned. As they drove down the familiar dirt road, Julian felt his heart beat a little faster. He was nervous, like a schoolboy going to see his first crush. What if she didn't want to see him? What if her mother had warned her away from him? Caleb parked the car under the shade of a large mango tree at the edge of the hamlet. "Her family's farm is just over that rise, my prince," he said quietly. "Wait here, Caleb," Julian said, getting out of the car. He had changed out of his royal robes and into a simple but elegant traditional outfit, hoping to look less intimidating. He walked over the small hill and saw it, a small patch of land where cassava plants grew in neat rows. And there she was. Aria was bent over, weeding the rows with a small hoe, her movements rhythmic and graceful. The sun was hot, and beads of sweat shone on her brow, but she worked with a quiet determination that he found beautiful. He stood for a moment just watching her. She was wearing a simple blouse and wrapper, her hair tied back neatly. She looked up as if she sensed his presence, and her eyes widened in surprise when she saw him. "Your Highness," she said, quickly dropping into a respectful curtsy. "Please, just Julian," he said, walking closer. "I told you there's no need for formalities." She straightened up, looking shy and uncertain. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the area," he said, which was only partly a lie. "I wanted to see if you and your family were all right. My driver told me your brother was unwell." Aria's face softened with gratitude. "He's much better. Thank you for the medicine you helped us buy. It worked very well. And thank you for the food you sent. We are very grateful." "It was nothing," he said. He looked at the small, tidy farm. "You do all this work by yourself?" "My brother helps when he is strong enough," she explained. "And my mother, she used to help before." Her voice trailed off. "Before what?" Julian asked gently. "Before she lost her sight," Aria said quietly. "It happened a few years ago. The doctors at the local clinic said there was nothing they could do." Julian's heart ached for her. He could see the weight of her family's burdens resting on her young shoulders, yet she bore it with such grace. He saw the strength in her, the resilience that had been forged by hardship. It was a quality he rarely saw in the wealthy women of his circle, like Selena. They talked for a long time, standing there under the hot sun. She told him about her love for the land, about her dreams of one day sending her brother to a good school. He listened, captivated by the simple honesty of her words. He felt a connection to her that was deeper and more real than anything he had ever felt with Selena. This was not about politics or power. This was about two people, two souls, finding each other in the most unexpected of places. "I want to help you, Aria," he said, his voice earnest. "Your mother should see a specialist in Oakhaven. I can arrange it. And your brother, he deserves the best medical care." Aria's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of hope, not sorrow. I don't know what to say. You are too kind." "It is the least I can do," he said. He wanted to reach out and wipe a tear from her cheek, but he stopped himself. It was too soon. He knew in that moment that his feelings for her were more than just a passing fancy. He was falling in love with this poor, strong, beautiful village girl. And he knew with a sinking feeling that his father would never approve. But as he looked at Aria, he felt a new resolve harden within him. He would not let his father's ambitions or Selena's jealousy stand in the way of this. He would find a way to be with her. As he walked back to the car, his heart was full. He felt as if he had finally found something true and precious. He didn't notice the man hiding in the bushes a short distance away, a camera with a long lens pointed directly at him. The man took several pictures of the prince and the village girl, their faces close together, their connection obvious even from a distance. Then he slipped away, his mission accomplished, unaware of the storm his pictures were about to unleash. The glossy photographs were spread across Selena's glass-topped coffee table like a declaration of war. Each one was a sharp, painful stab to her pride. There was Julian, her prince, her fiancé, smiling at that nobody. That girl in the faded wrapper with dirt under her fingernails, the intimacy in their posture, the gentle look on Julian's face, it was all there in vivid color. Selena's hands trembled as she picked up a photo. Her knuckles were white. "So this is his community project," she hissed to herself. Her private investigator had done his job well. He had not only followed Julian, but had also dug up information on the girl. Her name was Aria. She was living in poverty with a blind mother and a sick brother. The final insult was the report on the family's wicked uncle, a man named Malachi, who was trying to cheat them out of their land. A slow, cold fury burned in Selena's chest. This wasn't just about Julian's wandering eye. This was an attack on her status, her future, her very identity. She was to be the next queen, not some village girl who smelled of crops and poverty. The idea was absurd, insulting. She would not allow it. She had tried playing the part of the sophisticated modern woman, but it was clear that Julian was not impressed. He wanted someone traditional, someone with dignity. Fine. If she couldn't win him with charm, she would win by eliminating the competition. She needed to get rid of Aria, but it had to be done carefully. No one could trace it back to her. Her eyes fell on the investigator's notes about Mr. Malachi. A cruel, cunning idea began to form in her mind. This greedy, heartless uncle was the perfect tool. He already hated the family. He wanted their land. He would be easy to manipulate. She found his phone number in the report and dialed it. A rough voice answered on the other end. "Who is this?" "My name is not important," Selena said, her voice smooth as silk. "But I believe we have a common interest. I understand you are having some trouble with your late brother's family." There was a suspicious silence on the other end. "What is it to you?" "Let's just say I want them gone," Selena said coldly. "I want them out of the village, out of the state, and out of Prince Julian's life permanently." She heard a sharp intake of breath. "The prince?" "Yes," Selena confirmed. "That little girl has caught his eye, and I will not stand for it. I want you to make their lives so miserable that they have no choice but to run away and never come back. I want them to disappear." "That will cost you," Mr. Malachi said, his voice now filled with greedy excitement. "I am prepared to pay handsomely," Selena replied. She named a sum of money that was more than Mr. Malachi would see in 10 years of running his small market shop. It was a fortune to him. To her, it was a small price to pay for securing her future. "Consider it done," Mr. Malachi said eagerly. "They will be gone before the week is out. They won't know what hit them." "Good," Selena said, a thin, cruel smile playing on her lips. "And, Mr. Malachi, make sure no one ever finds out about this conversation. If this comes back to me, I will make sure you disappear as well." She hung up the phone and looked back at the photographs on her table. She picked them up one by one and tore them into tiny pieces. She felt a sense of power, of control. Julian thought he could defy her, defy his father for this poor girl. He was a fool. She would show him. She would show them all. She would crush this little Aria and grind her into the same dirt she came from. And when it was all over, Julian would come back to her. He would have no other choice. She sat back on her plush sofa, the torn pieces of the photos scattered around her like confetti. And for the first time since she had returned from the West, she smiled a true, satisfied smile. The game was on, and she had just made her first move. The air in the small room was thick with the smell of herbal balm. Aria gently rubbed the ointment onto her brother's chest. Leo had been feeling better for a few days, but tonight a fever had returned, and his breathing was shallow. Mother Ilara sat nearby, her hands clasped tightly, her blind eyes wide with worry as she listened to every cough and groan. "He needs a real doctor, Aria," she murmured for the 10th time. "The medicine from the village store is not enough." "I know, Mother," Aria said, her voice strained. "The prince, he said he would help. He said he would send for a doctor from the city." It had been almost a week since Prince Julian's visit to their farm. He had sent his driver, Caleb, back twice with more food and a little money, but they had not seen the prince himself. A small seed of doubt had begun to sprout in Aria's heart. Had he forgotten his promise? Was it all just the careless words of a rich man feeling a moment of pity? She pushed the thought away. She had to believe in his kindness. It was the only hope she had. Outside, the night was dark and still. The usual chorus of crickets and frogs was a comforting sound. Suddenly, a loud bang on their flimsy wooden door shattered the peace. "Who is it?" Aria called out, her heart jumping with fear. The door burst open, and a group of men stormed in. In the dim light of their single kerosene lamp, Aria recognized the cruel face of her uncle, Mr. Malachi. He was flanked by 2 large, rough-looking men she had seen loitering around the local tavern. "What do you want?" Aria cried, jumping to her feet and standing protectively in front of her mother and brother. "We've come to collect what is ours," Mr. Malachi sneered, his eyes darting around the small room. "This house, this land, it all belongs to me now. You have overstayed your welcome." "This is our home," Aria said, her voice shaking but defiant. "Our father left it to us." Mr. Malachi laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Your father is dead, and your brother is a weakling. I am the man of this family now, and I say you leave tonight." One of the thugs grabbed Leo and dragged him from the bed.